How many times have you dipped your fingers into the holy water font and made the sign of the cross without really thinking about what you were touching? I'm not saying that to judge you. I'm saying it because Saint Teresa of Avila did the very same thing for years, until one night something happened that changed forever the way she understood that simple gesture. And what she discovered, what she afterwards wrote down with a trembling hand, has everything to do with the days you are living through right now, with what is coming, with someone you may have been entrusting to God for a long time, wondering whether your prayers are reaching them with the full force they could carry. There is something Teresa warned about holy water before Palm Sunday, something very few people have ever heard, and something you need to know before those sacred days arrive. She was not a woman who minced her words. When Teresa of Avila wrote a warning, it was because she had seen something, felt something, or received something that would not allow her to stay silent. And about holy water, she wrote with an urgency that even her own Carmelite sisters took time to fully grasp. Not as a pious gesture made at the church door, not as a custom passed down from our grandmothers, but as a real force, with direction, with a recipient, with a moment in time when its power multiplies in ways that reason alone simply cannot explain. That moment is very close, and what Teresa left written about it was preserved in Carmelite convents as a living practice, not as a historical curiosity. What you are about to hear is not devotion as decoration. It is a warning, with a name, with a date, and with consequences for the souls you love most. There are objects we touch our entire lives without knowing what they truly hold. Holy water is one of them. You have seen it since childhood, at the entrance to the church, at the threshold of your grandmother's home, in a small glass or ceramic vessel that someone placed near the door so many years ago that nobody can quite remember when it first appeared. You touch it, you make the sign of the cross, and you walk on. There is nothing wrong with that gesture. But there is something that gesture is not telling you, something underneath it, like a current running deep while the surface appears still. Saint Teresa of Avila understood that current, not gradually, not the way one absorbs a doctrine over the years. She understood it on a specific night, inside her cell, at the convent of the Incarnation in Avila, when something that had no right to be there appeared before her, and she, without a moment's hesitation, reached for the only thing within her grasp: holy water. What happened next left her speechless for a moment, and then filled her with a certainty she would carry for the rest of her life. She wrote about it herself in her book of her life. She did not recount it vaguely or hint at it between the lines. She stated it with a directness that can feel almost uncomfortable for those of us accustomed to treating sacramentals as little more than beautiful symbols. In her own words, Saint Teresa wrote that holy water possesses a very particular power against the forces of evil, and that she had proven this for herself again and again, that her soul was consoled and strengthened with a swiftness she could not attribute to suggestion or imagination, because the effects were far too concrete and too consistent to be explained away. The soul rested in it. The ground beneath her feet felt firm once more. Stop and sit with that for a moment. Teresa was not a frightened novice clinging to a ritual out of fear. She was a woman with decades of interior life behind her, who had passed through the prayer of quiet, through union, through the highest graces a human creature can receive in this life. By her own account, she had long since ceased to fear demons any more than she feared flies. And yet she said that holy water filled her with a peace that nothing else produced in her with the same speed and the same steadiness. That is not sentimental devotion. That is the testimony of a doctor of the Church who knew exactly what she was saying and had absolutely no reason to exaggerate. But there is something more in that same teaching, something that is almost always left out when Teresa's words on holy water are quoted. Because Teresa did not speak of this sacramental only as a personal shield against evil. She spoke of it as a channel, as a line of communication between those of us still living and those who have already gone before us. And this is where her teaching becomes something that most Catholics today have never encountered, or have heard so briefly in passing that they never paused to consider what it actually means. Water, in biblical tradition and in the theology of the Church, is never simply water. From the very first chapter of Genesis, when the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters, water is the place where the divine touches creation. It is the matter God chose for baptism. It is the first visible sign of the Spirit acting upon the created world. And when the Church blesses water, she is not performing a decorative ritual or a cultural ceremony. She is invoking upon that water the full weight of what water has meant throughout the entire history of salvation. She is transforming that simple, transparent liquid into an echo of the baptismal waters, a material reminder that we were redeemed, a living presence of the grace given to us on the day of our baptism that did not expire in that moment, but continues to be ours, continues to be real, continues to be active when we call upon it with faith. For the souls in purgatory, according to the understanding Teresa had of the communion of saints, that reminder is neither abstract nor decorative. It is a real intercession that arrives, that touches, that brings relief. When you take holy water with faith and offer it for someone who is no longer here, you are not making an empty gesture. You are using a channel that the Church has kept open for centuries for precisely this purpose. You are sending something toward where that person is. And that something carries weight, has direction, and has consequences you cannot see, but which are as real as the faith that propels them. And so the question arises that Teresa asked herself, the very same question that anyone who has lost someone they loved ought to ask. If this channel exists, if it is open, if it works, why do we not use it more consciously? Why do we touch it out of habit, out of routine, without direction, without a recipient, without asking anything specific of the water that carries within it the power of the baptismal promise and the strength of centuries of the Church's faith? Teresa did not leave she answered it, and her answer has layers. Because the efficacy of holy water, in her experience and in the tradition of the Church, is not the same throughout the entire year. There are moments when that channel widens. There are liturgical seasons when the whole Church is oriented in a single direction. And when holy water is used during those seasons with the right intention, something occurs that does not occur in the same way or with the same intensity at other times of year. One of those seasons is very close to where you are right now. And Teresa did not merely point to it. She warned about it, with the urgency of someone who knows that an opportunity missed is an opportunity lost. Because what opens in the days before Palm Sunday does not wait. It arrives, it remains for a brief time, and it closes. And the souls who might have received relief through your intercession during that window will have to wait through another full cycle, another year, another Lent, another opportunity that will not come on its own either. That is what Teresa saw. That is what compelled her to write. And to understand it fully, you first need to understand how she looked at Lent itself, not as a schedule of deprivations, but as something alive, as a battlefield, and at the same time, as the threshold of the greatest victory the world has ever known. Lent was not, for Teresa, a season of managed sadness. It was not 40 days of giving things up in order to square accounts with God and then go back to normal life afterward. In her deepest experience, it was a time when the veil between the visible and the invisible grew thin in a way it did not grow thin at any other point in the year. A time when the souls who had already departed were, in some way she could not fully explain, but had felt too many times to dismiss, closer, not in any ghostly or frightening sense, but in a way that asked something, that waited for something from those of us still here. Teresa spent years of her interior life not fully understanding this closeness. She felt it during Lent as a kind of gentle weight in her chest, an awareness that someone on the other side needed her prayer more in these days than in others. She did not explain it as a passing emotion or as seasonal melancholy. She explained it as a spiritual perception that grew sharper as her interior life deepened. And when that perception reached sufficient clarity, what she found on the other side was not vague or diffuse. It was specific souls, with names, with stories, with a kind of suffering that was not of the body but of the soul that has not yet finished being purified, that knows with a lucidity we do not possess how far it still has to go, and how much depends on the love of those left behind. That is purgatory, as Teresa understood it. Not a place of arbitrary punishment imposed from outside, not a penalty God applies to those who failed to reach some required score of virtue, but the natural and merciful process of a soul that loves God, that longs to be with Him, that can no longer sin because it has already passed out of time, yet still carries the weight of what was not purified during life. Like a person who wants with all their heart to embrace someone they love, and discovers that their hands are still dirty, and that they cannot give that embrace without first cleaning them. The suffering is not God's rejection. It is the distance the soul itself recognizes between what it is and what it needs to be in order to receive, without reservation, what awaits it. And during Lent, according to Teresa's understanding, that distance becomes especially acute for souls undergoing purification, because Lent is the season when the whole Church turns her eyes toward the Passion of Christ. And the Passion of Christ is precisely what made purgatory possible, not as condemnation, but as mercy. Without the Passion, the soul in debt would have nowhere to go. Without the death and resurrection of Christ, there would be no space of purification where God's love continues working upon the soul that can no longer work upon itself. Purgatory is a work of paschal mercy, and when the whole Church orients herself toward that mercy during these 40 days, the souls being purified feel it in a way they do not feel it the same way for the rest of the year. A home where a Catholic prays during Lent is therefore not merely a house. It is an active point of intercession. It is a place from which those who have already departed can be reached with a particular effectiveness that these days make possible, and that other days do not carry in the same way. And if holy water is used in that home with faith, with intention, with a clear recipient held in the heart, that reach is multiplied in a way Teresa did not hesitate to describe with precision in her teaching to the Carmelites. But here is where the warning comes in, because using holy water during just any week of Lent is not the same as using it in the days immediately before Palm Sunday. Doing it out of habit, as an automatic gesture, is not the same as doing it with full awareness of what you are doing and for whom. And there is something else Teresa considered indispensable if holy water was to fulfill its function as a channel between the living and those who wait, an interior disposition without which the gesture remains on the surface, like a word spoken aloud in an empty room, syllables perfectly formed, but with no one there to receive them. That disposition is not difficult to reach. It requires no years of mystical life, no extraordinary graces. It is within reach of any person who prays simply and who loves their departed. But it needs to be known, and it needs to be practiced in a specific way on the right days. Not in just any fashion, at just any moment. What happens in a home and in the souls of the departed when Palm Sunday approaches and no one in that house has done what Teresa warned needed to be done. That is not a punishment. It is not a condemnation. It is simply a lost opportunity, a door that stood open and that no one walked through. And Teresa considered that serious enough to state plainly, with tenderness, but without softening it to the point of losing its force. Because genuine love does not hold back the necessary warnings. It delivers them as gently as possible, but it delivers them. What opens spiritually in the days before Palm Sunday What Teresa perceived in her visions concerning the condition of souls during that particular season is what you are about to understand. And once you understand it, the holy water you have at home will not be quite the same object it was before you began listening to this. There are visions in Teresa's writings that the Church examined, approved, and recognized as an authentic part of her mystical experience. Not all of them are consoling. Some carry a weight she herself describes as unbearable in the moment of receiving them, though they afterward brought a peace that no suffering could take from her. Among those visions are several that concern purgatory, the state of souls during the stronger liturgical seasons, and what happens during those periods when the living pray with intention, and when the days pass without anyone doing so. Teresa did not organize these visions into a theological treatise. She did not present them as an instruction manual with numbered steps and guaranteed results. She recounted them for what they were, experiences that marked her profoundly, that compelled her to change the way she lived her prayer, and that she felt a responsibility to pass on so that others would not lose what she had nearly lost through ignorance, not through any lack of goodwill, not through any lack of faith, simply through not knowing what no one had yet taught her. And among all the visions she received concerning purgatory, there is a recurring element that we would not expect to find in that context: liturgical time. The souls Teresa saw in a state of purification did not experience time the way we do. For them, calendar time did not exist in the same way. But the liturgical time of the Church militant was neither indifferent nor invisible to them. On the contrary, it was like a light arriving from outside their condition, affecting them in different ways, depending on what moment of the year the Church was living out her central mysteries. When the Church prayed together, when the faithful gathered around the central mysteries of the faith with a collective and deliberate orientation, something of that prayer reached the souls in purification with an intensity it did not carry the rest of the year. As though the unanimous direction of so many hearts towards the Paschal mystery created a current that carried with it something of grace toward those who were waiting in that state of suffering and hopeful love. The days before Palm Sunday were, in what Teresa perceived, a threshold of unique character within the liturgical cycle, because Palm Sunday is not the beginning of Holy Week in a neutral or administrative sense. It is the first day of the week in which the Church relives with the greatest intensity the journey Christ made from acclamation to the cross. It is the day when the liturgy introduces into the hearts of the faithful a tension that was not present before with the same force, the tension between the Hosanna and the Crucify Him, between the palm branch waved with joy and the crown of thorns that will come within days. That tension is not a dramatic device of the liturgy. It is the real tension of the mystery of redemption, compressed into a single week, beginning with that Sunday of triumphal entry that already carries within it the shadow of what is to come. For the souls in purification, according to what Teresa described in her writings, and in the oral teachings her sisters faithfully recorded, that entry into the week of the Passion represented something she compared to the moment when a long process reaches its decisive point. It is not yet the healing. It is not yet the liberation. But it is the moment when everything that has been building begins to reveal whether it was sufficient or whether something more is needed. And what the living do or do not do in the days leading up to that Sunday determines, in part, with what force that current of Paschal grace reaches the souls who need it most. Teresa observed something that struck her with an intensity she herself admits was difficult to sustain. She saw souls arriving at the threshold of the Paschal Triduum, carrying a weight they did not need to continue bearing. Souls that were closer than they themselves knew to receiving the relief that God's mercy had prepared for them, but who arrived at that threshold without having been reached by the intercession of their loved ones in the preceding days. not because those families did not love them, not because they were poor Catholics or people of little faith, simply because no one had ever taught them that those specific days represented a different kind of opportunity, an opportunity with a limited window of time that did not repeat itself in the same way until the following liturgical year. That is what Teresa saw, and that is what moved her to establish very concrete practices in her convents for those days. Practices her sisters kept alive across generations as part of the spiritual inheritance of the Carmelite reform. Practices that over time were gradually lost outside the convent walls, in the wider world of ordinary faithful who love their departed and pray for them, but who never received this particular teaching. There's one part of what Teresa saw that we have not yet mentioned, the part that explains why holy water specifically, and not some other sacramental, is the channel she pointed to for these days. The link she found between this sacramental and the way Christ himself walked toward Jerusalem that week. That link is the key that gives complete meaning to everything else, and it is in her own words, written with the direct clarity that characterized everything Teresa committed to paper when she wanted something never to be forgotten. In chapter 31 of her book of her life, Saint Teresa of Avila wrote something that her confessors underlined, that her contemporaries debated, and that the Church ultimately recognized as part of the authentic body of her mystical experience. It is not a sentence plucked out of context. It is the result of years of interior observation, of confronting what she herself did not initially want to believe, and of a spiritual honesty that would not allow her to soften what she had seen in order to make it more comfortable or more readily accepted. In her own words, Saint Teresa wrote that holy water has a very particular power against evil spirits, that she had proven this for herself many times over, and that her soul was consoled and strengthened with a swiftness she could not attribute to suggestion or to her own imagination, because the effects were too concrete and too consistent to be explained that way. Up to this point, the passage is familiar to many. It is the part quoted in catechism classes and homilies when holy water is discussed as a sacramental of protection. But what comes immediately after in that same chapter is almost always omitted. And it is what completely transforms the scope of what Teresa is actually saying. Because she does not stop at the defensive function of holy water. She goes one step further. And that step has everything to do with the departed, with the souls who wait, with the intercession the living can exercise through this sacramental in a way that no other devotional practice replaces with the same efficacy during the stronger liturgical seasons. Teresa writes that on several occasions, when she prayed explicitly for people who had already died, she sensed that the use of holy water, accompanied by a clear and spoken intention, produced something in her interior experience that she did not find when she prayed without it. Not an emotion, not a subjective comfort, but something she describes as an opening, as though holy water functioned not only as a shield, but as a door between her prayer and the person for whom she was praying, someone on the other side of time, in a state she could not see with the eyes of the body, but could touch in some real and consistent way through the channel the Church had consecrated and kept open since the earliest centuries of the faith. The difference between using holy water as a shield and using it as a door is precisely the difference between a devotion that protects us and a devotion that intercedes for others, between a gesture that looks inward and a gesture that looks to the other side. Teresa believed the faithful needed to learn to use holy water in both ways, not only one. But in the days before Palm Sunday, her insistence was always on the second function, the door, the departed who were waiting for someone on earth to remember that those days were unlike any others in the year. The theological reasoning Teresa offered for this distinction is as follows. The efficacy of intercession does not depend solely on the faith of the one praying, nor on the merit of the sacramental being used. It depends also on the liturgical time in which the prayer is offered. Not mechanically, not as though God had availability windows that open and close on the calendar, but because liturgical seasons are not human conventions established by the Church out of habit or organizational necessity. They are the Church living the mysteries of Christ within historical time. And when the Church lives a mystery, that mystery is real and spiritually active in the life of the believing community, not merely recalled as a past event. The Passion of Christ is not simply something that occurred 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem and that the liturgy commemorates as an anniversary. It is an eternal mystery that the liturgy makes truly present, sacramentally, operatively, in the life of the Church each time she celebrates it. And when that mystery is being made present by the entire Church during Holy Week, its redemptive power is active in a particular way. Available in a way it is not equally available in July or October or on any ordinary Sunday of the year. Using holy water for the departed in the days before Palm Sunday is therefore using that sacramental at the precise moment when the door between the Church militant and the Church being purified stands more open than at any other point in the liturgical cycle. This is not an unfounded popular belief. It is the internal logic of the Paschal mystery applied to the communion of saints. And it is what Teresa taught with a precision her sisters did not forget, because they watched her live it, not merely heard her explain it. Teresa's concrete warning was this: do not arrive at Palm Sunday without having prepared your heart and your home, without having used holy water with explicit intention for the souls you love most, who are most in need of your intercession during this extraordinary season of grace. Not because a failure to do so will bring some consequence upon you, but because if you do not, you lose something that cannot be recovered until the following year, an opportunity that will be available during these few days and that without your active participation will pass, without anyone making use of it for those who depend on your prayers. That is the warning. Complete, named and dated. And now that you know it, the question is no longer whether you will use holy water before Palm Sunday. The question is how, with what words, at what moment of the day, with what interior disposition. Because Teresa did not leave the warning without an answer. She also left the practice. And the practice has a precision that you will recognize the moment you hear it, as though some part of you had been waiting for it without knowing it was waiting. In the convents Teresa founded, the week before Palm Sunday was not an ordinary week of Lent. It was a week of deliberate preparation, with specific practices that Teresa had established not as written rules in the constitutions, but as a living tradition passed from prioress to prioress, from novice mistress to novice mistress, from one generation to the next within the Carmelite reform. A tradition she herself oversaw while she lived, which she corrected whenever it became distorted, and which she would explain afresh whenever she saw it being practiced mechanically and emptily, without the intention that was its very soul. At the center of that preparation was holy water, not as the sole or exclusive element, but as the thread that connected the personal prayer of each sister to the liturgical prayer of the whole Church, and both to the souls being purified in Purgatory, who during those days found themselves in a particular condition of openness to the grace arriving from earth through the intercession of the living. The first practice was simple in its form, but demanding in its substance. Each morning of that week, upon rising, before mental prayer and before the liturgy of the hours, the first action was to take the holy water kept in the cell and make the sign of the cross with it, slowly. Not in haste, not as part of a routine the body carries out while the mind is elsewhere, with the mind present and the heart engaged, with an awareness of the baptism received, of the grace that baptism conferred and that remained real and operative, and with a name in the heart. The name of the departed for whom that gesture was being offered that morning. Not several names at once. Teresa taught that scattered intention arrives scattered. One name, one soul. One gesture offered with all the faith the particular morning could gather. That sounds simple, and it is, in its outward form. But to do it truthfully, with the interior presence it requires, every day of that week, without habit emptying it out or haste reducing it to an automatism, demands a fresh decision each morning. A decision to be present, to ensure that the holy water is not merely cold water on the fingertips, but what the Church intended it to be when a priest pronounced the prayers of blessing over it. A living, active channel of grace, directed toward someone who needs it and cannot ask for it themselves. The second practice took place at the end of the day, in the hour before the great silence. Each sister would walk the four corners of her cell, sprinkling holy water in silence. No formulas recited aloud, no elaborate gestures. Only an intention held steadily in the heart for those brief minutes. That the space where she had spent that day, where she had prayed and worked and struggled and rested, might become an offering for the souls of those who had once asked the sisters for prayers and were still waiting. Those who had died with spiritual debts outstanding. Those who had no one praying for them with constancy. Those who were close to receiving full purification and needed just a little more intercession to cross that threshold. Teresa insisted on something her sisters recorded repeatedly in the written testimonies they left about her manner of teaching, that the amount of water does not matter. It is not about sprinkling much or making broad, visible gestures. It is about sprinkling with living faith. A single drop of holy water offered with living faith and a clear intention is worth more in spiritual terms than an entire vessel emptied mechanically with the heart absent from the gesture. Not because God measures in volumes or compares quantities, but because faith is the real channel through which grace flows, and holy water is the outward sign of that interior channel. And outward signs need to be inhabited from within in order to fulfill the purpose for which they were established. There is a third practice that Teresa reserved specifically for the afternoon of the Saturday before Palm Sunday. This practice has a dimension that reaches beyond the individual cell and personal prayer. It concerns the home understood as a space of intercession. What happens when holy water is used not only for one's own sanctification, but to transform the place where we live into a meeting point between those still in time and those who wait in God's mercy. Teresa understood the home as a small church, not metaphorically, but in a real spiritual sense. The home where there is faith, where prayer happens, where holy water is used with intention, where the departed are remembered with love rather than merely with nostalgia. That home is connected to the universal church in a way that has consequences. What happens within its walls matters beyond those walls. And in the days before Palm Sunday, that significance is magnified because the liturgical time being lived magnifies the power of everything done with faith within that space. What Teresa taught for that Saturday afternoon, the concrete gestures and the precise intentions she passed on to her sisters for that specific moment of the year, is what connects everything you have heard so far with what remains to be heard. Because that practice is not simply one more devotion. It is the complete response to the warning Teresa gave. It is what she wanted her sisters, and through them all the faithful who might hear her, to do before Palm Sunday arrived, before the door opened fully and they were not ready to walk through it. The Saturday before Palm Sunday carries a spiritual quality that Teresa described with an image her sisters always remembered. She said that day was like the moment when someone is preparing to receive a beloved and long-awaited guest. The house is not yet ready. The guest has not yet arrived, but everyone knows that by tomorrow he will be here. And in that space between the not yet and the already coming, there is a tension of love and waiting that is unlike anything else. That tension does not exist in the same way the day before or the day after. Only in that threshold. Only in that afternoon of preparation that precedes the entry. Palm Sunday is the entry. the entry of Christ into Jerusalem, which the Church relives each year not as theatrical reenactment, but as real participation in the mystery. And the Saturday that precedes it is the day when the heart of the faithful, who has prepared well throughout Lent, stands at precisely that point of tension Teresa described. He knows what is coming. He feels the weight of what the week will bring. And he also knows, if he has received the right teaching, that there is something he can do in those hours of preparation that he will not be able to do with the same efficacy once the liturgy of Sunday has begun. The practice Teresa established for that afternoon began at the hour of evening prayer, as the day's light began to change and the convent prepared for the silence of the night. Each sister would take the vessel of holy water from her cell, not a large container, not an impressive amount, the same small flask or bowl she kept beside her bed or near the crucifix on her wall, and she would begin to walk through her cell in silence, sprinkling the walls, the floor, the threshold of the door, the place where she prayed, without words spoken aloud, with a single intention sustained without interruption throughout that brief journey, that this space would become an offering, that everything that had taken place within it during that week, every prayer, every act of mortification, every moment of interior struggle, and every instant of peace received, would be offered in that gesture for the souls who were waiting. After walking through the cell, Teresa added something that set this Saturday practice apart from the practices of the preceding days. Once the silent walk was complete, the sister would kneel in her place of prayer and name, one by one, and in a low voice, each of the departed for whom she had been offering her gestures throughout that week. Not rushing through a list, the way one speaks a beloved name in the dark, knowing that name reaches the one who bears it, with the time each name deserved, with the love each particular story inspired. And as she spoke each name, she would let a small amount of holy water fall from her fingers, or sprinkle it gently toward the floor, or toward the small altar she kept, like someone planting a seed in soil that had been prepared for days to receive it. Teresa explained this gesture with a clarity her sisters faithfully preserved, that a name spoken with love at that moment, accompanied by holy water on the eve of Palm Sunday, was like placing that soul in the arms of Christ's triumphal entry, like saying to Christ, who was about to begin the journey of his redeeming passion, that there was a soul who needed to be carried along that path, that it could not walk alone, that someone on earth was entrusting it with faith and with holy water on the eve of his entry, so that it would not be left behind when the current of paschal grace began to flow. This is not magic. There is no automatism in this gesture, no belief in forces independent of God's will. It is intercession. It is using the language of the sacramentals that the Church placed in the hands of the faithful for precisely this purpose, so that the communion of saints would not be merely a doctrine professed in the creed, but a living practice carried out with the body, with gestures, with holy water that wets the fingers and the stone or wooden floor of the room where we live. And what Palm Sunday activates the following day, once the liturgy begins with the blessing of palms and the proclamation of the gospel of Christ's entry, reaches also the souls named the afternoon before, not because the liturgy functions automatically, but because the disposition of the heart of the faithful who enters that liturgy carrying names, carrying intentions, carrying the living memory of their departed, prepared through a whole week of deliberate gestures, creates a continuity of intercession that the liturgical grace can sustain and amplify in a way that without that preparation would not be possible in quite the same manner. Teresa lived it, she taught it, she practiced it until the end of her life. And there is something in this teaching that when one hears it for the first time with an open heart, produces a feeling that is difficult to name precisely, like something that was always there, available, waiting to be used, that has finally found the hands that were looking for it without quite knowing what they were looking for. The souls waiting for your intercession do not need you to be perfect. They do not need you to be a mystic or a theologian. They need you to have holy water, faith, and their names in your heart when that Saturday afternoon arrives, and it is closer than you may think. Teresa did not speak only of what the living could do for the departed during these days. She also spoke of what she herself perceived from the side of the souls undergoing purification when that season came. And what she perceived has a dimension that very few spiritual teachings touch with such honesty and such tenderness at the same time. Because it is not easy to speak of what souls in purgatory experience during Holy Week without falling into one of two opposite errors: the sentimentality that softens everything until the truth is lost, or the rigidity that hardens everything until the mercy is lost. Teresa always walked between those two extremes with a precision that only comes from years of honest interior life. What she described is this: the souls undergoing purification have an awareness of God that those of us still living in time cannot fully imagine. They do not yet see God directly. If they did, they would already be in heaven. But they perceive Him in a way that makes everything separating them from Him unbearably clear. Not like a darkness that does not know what it seeks, but like the darkness of a closed room when you know with certainty that the light is just on the other side of the door, and that the door will open but has not opened yet. In that state of lucid and painful waiting, the liturgical seasons of the church militant are perceived in a way Teresa described as waves, not with mechanical regularity, not like a clock marking hours, but as waves of warmth or of light arriving from outside their condition, moving them in ways they themselves can neither control nor provoke. When the whole church turns toward the Paschal mystery, when the faithful begin to live Holy Week with a particular intensity, those waves become more frequent and more sustained for the souls undergoing purification. And when someone on earth has deliberately prepared their intercession during the preceding days, when they have used holy water with intention and spoken names with love on the eve of Palm Sunday, those waves arrive marked. They arrive with direction. They arrive as though carrying written upon them the name of the one who sent them. Teresa described visions in which she saw the effect of this intercession in a way that moved her to tears, not from grief, from gratitude, from the certainty that what the living do with faith for their departed truly arrives. It does not get lost along the way. It does not drift without a recipient. It arrives. And in the days before the Paschal Triduum, it arrives with a multiplied power that the soul receiving it perceives in a way it does not perceive the rest of the year. But Teresa also saw the other side. She saw souls arriving at the threshold of the Paschal Triduum without having received that prepared intercession. Not because their loved ones did not love them, not because no one had ever prayed for them, but because no one had prayed for them in that specific way, on those specific days, with that specific disposition that multiplied the efficacy of everything else. And those souls arrived at the threshold of the Paschal mystery, carrying a weight they did not need to go on bearing, with a distance from God that could have been shortened if someone on earth had known what was available to them in those days and had acted accordingly. That was what weighed most heavily on Teresa when she recounted it. Not the suffering of purgatory in itself, which she understood as mercy and not as punishment, but the missed opportunity, the available grace that no one claimed because no one knew it was there, the open channel that no one used because no one had been taught that during those days that channel had a different capacity. That moved her to teach with urgency, the urgency of someone who knows that time is real, that opportunities pass, and that genuine love cannot content itself with good intentions when something more concrete and more effective is within reach. And there is something Teresa always added when she reached this point in her teaching, something that softened the urgency without diminishing the truth. She would say that God does not abandon any soul that died in His love, even if no one prays for it. that God's mercy does not depend upon our getting everything right, that purgatory is already a work of that mercy, and that no soul within it is abandoned. But she would also say that God willed that the intercession of the living be part of the process of purification, not because He needs it, but because He gave it to us as a gift, as a way of continuing to love those who are no longer here, as a way of ensuring that death is not the end of love, only a change in the manner of living it. Holy water used with faith in the days before Palm Sunday is exactly that, an act of love that crosses the threshold of death, that reaches where your arms cannot reach, that says with a small and concrete gesture that you have not forgotten, that you are still here, that you are still loving, and that you are willing to use everything the Church has given you so that love reaches those who need it in the most effective way possible. But now, there is something you need to know about what you can do with what you already have at home in the days that remain before that Sunday arrives. Now you know what Teresa warned. This warning no longer belongs only to her or to the Carmelites of the 16th century. It is yours. You have received it. And receiving it means that whatever you do or do not do in the days remaining before Palm Sunday will not be a matter of ignorance. It will be a matter of choice. That difference matters, not because God judges you for what you did not know before, but because you yourself now know what you hold in your hands and what you can do with it. The first thing Teresa would say if she were here, seated across from you, speaking in that direct and warm voice her contemporaries said was impossible to forget once heard, would be this: do not overcomplicate it. Do not search for an elaborate ritual that requires special objects or perfect conditions. God's grace does not need perfection from you in order to work. It needs faith. It needs intention. It needs you to be present in what you do, even if just for a minute, even if your life is full of noise and obligations and days that end before you have done half of what you intended. Here is what you can do. In the days remaining before Palm Sunday, each morning as you rise, before the movement of the day begins, take the holy water you have at home. If you do not have any, collect some from your parish. Any priest can give it to you. It is a sacramental the Church makes available to the faithful without conditions. Take that water and make the sign of the cross slowly, with your eyes open or closed, whichever feels most natural, but with a name in your heart, the name of the departed for whom you are offering that gesture that morning. Just one, the first one that comes to mind, because generally the first to come is the one who most needs it, or the one closest to your love. You do not need to say long or perfect words. You might say simply, "For you," or "May this reach you," or just the name itself, spoken with all the faith available to you in that moment, which some mornings will be abundant and other mornings will be no more than a thin thread. And that thin thread is enough if it is made of genuine love. Teresa said it in many different ways and always arrived at the same place, that God does not measure the quantity of faith, but the authenticity of it. That a small act done with a whole heart is worth more than 100 grand acts performed out of habit. In the afternoon, if you can, walk through the rooms of your home sprinkling holy water in silence. You do not need to cover every room if time does not permit. The room where you most pray, or the entrance, or the place where you keep photographs of your departed. The space that feels most yours, most charged with memory and love. Sprinkle it quietly with the same intention you brought to the morning gesture. That continuity between dawn and dusk creates something Teresa described as a chain of intercession that lasts all day, not interrupted even as you go about your ordinary life, because it was well begun in the morning and well closed in the afternoon. And on the Saturday afternoon before Palm Sunday, do what Teresa taught. Take time, even 20 minutes. Sit in the place where you pray. Take the holy water and name, one by one, and in a low voice, the departed, for whom you have been offering your gestures throughout that week. Not in a rush, with the time each name deserves. And as you speak each name, letting a small amount of holy water fall from your fingers, or sprinkling it gently toward the floor or toward the small sacred corner you keep at home, tell God that that soul goes with you to Sunday. That when you enter the liturgy of Palm Sunday, when you receive the blessed palm and hear the gospel of Christ's entry into Jerusalem, that soul goes in your heart, that you are not leaving them outside, that you are carrying them with you, that you are using the channel the Church gave you so that they too might receive something of the current of grace that mystery pours out. That is all. There are no further steps, no prior conditions to meet, no formulas to memorize. There is holy water, a beloved name, faith, and a liturgical season that amplifies everything done with those three things during these days. Teresa spent years of interior life arriving at this simplicity, because the deepest spiritual truth always ends up being simple once everything non-essential has been stripped away. What is about to arrive is Palm Sunday, the entry of Christ, the beginning of the holiest week of the year. And you now have something that most of the faithful who will enter their church that Sunday with a palm branch in hand will not have: Teresa's warning, the practice she transmitted, the awareness that the holy water you carry in your heart that day, prepared through a week of deliberate and loving gestures, reaches where it needs to reach. It reaches those who wait. It reaches them with the weight of Christ's passion, which from that Sunday begins to be lived with the greatest intensity of the entire year. You arrive at Palm Sunday prepared, and those you love, those who are no longer here but who remain yours in the communion of saints, arrive with you. You made it to the end, and that is no small thing. In a world that asks you to move quickly, to consume and move on, to never linger anywhere too long because something more pressing is always waiting, you chose to stay. You chose to listen. You chose to give this the time it deserved. And what you received today is not information to be stored in memory and forgotten by next week. It is something that has already changed the way you will touch holy water the next time it is on your fingers. Something that has already placed a name in your heart more clearly than before. A name that now has direction, a channel, a concrete way of reaching where you have always wanted it to reach. Saint Teresa of Avila did not speak to you today from the pages of history books or from the shelves of a library. She spoke to you from the same faith you carry, from the same love for the departed that you know, from the same certainty that death is not the end of love, only the moment when love must learn a new language. And she taught you words in that language, gestures, intentions, moments of the day and moments of the year when that language becomes more fluent, more powerful, more capable of crossing the threshold that separates your world from the world of those who wait. What Teresa warned about holy water before Palm Sunday was not a warning born of fear. It was a warning born of love. The same maternal love with which she guided her Carmelite sisters whenever she saw them about to lose something precious, simply because no one had told them they had it. You know now that you have it. You cannot unknow it. And that is a gift that not everyone walking into church this Palm Sunday with a palm in their hand will have received. You received it today. Use it. There is one more thing Teresa would say before taking her leave. Something she always said when she finished teaching something important, because she understood the human heart's tendency to receive a teaching with emotion and then let it go cold before the moment to practice it arrives. She would tell you, do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait until you feel sufficiently devout, sufficiently prepared, sufficiently worthy for your gestures to be heard. Worthiness does not come before the gesture. It comes within it. Every time you take holy water with faith, even if you are the most imperfect and inconsistent person in the world, in that moment you are being exactly what God intended you to be. Someone who loves and who uses what the Church has given them so that love travels further than their own strengths could carry it. Palm Sunday is near. The days that remain are few, and they are enough. You have holy water, or you can get some. You have names in your heart that no one needs to remind you of, because they are written there with an ink that does not fade. And you now have Teresa's teaching to give those names a direction, a channel, a moment when everything you feel for those souls can become something that truly reaches them. That is what I came to leave with you today. And if something in what you heard moved you, if something lit in you that quiet certainty that this was true before you had finished listening, do not keep it only for yourself. There is someone in your life, a friend, a sister, a mother, someone who has long been carrying the weight of a beloved departed, and who does not know that she holds in her hands the possibility of bringing them relief in this concrete way. Share this with her, not as someone passing along information, as someone passing a lit candle in the dark. Because Teresa's teaching was never meant to be kept to oneself. It was meant to travel, to reach as many hearts as possible before the days pass and the opportunity closes. And if today, after everything you have heard, you feel that there is more you want to know, more that Teresa has to say to you about the interior life, about the departed, about the prayer that arrives and the prayer that stays on the surface, about the mysteries the Church holds in her tradition that very few people know at this depth, then what you are looking for is already waiting for you. There is a teaching Teresa left about what happens to the souls of our departed during the days of the Paschal Triduum specifically, about what takes place on Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday in Purgatory, about what the living can do on those 3 days that they cannot do at any other moment in the liturgical year. It is the natural continuation of what you received today, the next step in the same direction. And when this video ends, you will find it there, waiting for you, ready to give you what you have not yet received. Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving your departed the time they deserved today. Thank you for being the kind of person who is not satisfied with a surface-level love, but who seeks the way for that love to arrive whole, with all its strength, to the place where it is most needed. In her own words, Saint Teresa wrote that the soul that truly loves cannot rest until it feels its love has arrived, that it has touched, that it has done something, that the return it awaits for the love it has given is not here in this passing life, but there, where nothing is lost and where everything done with faith and with love remains forever. God bless you. May Saint Teresa accompany you in these holy days. And may every drop of holy water you offer before Palm Sunday reach, carried by your love, exactly where it needs to go.